I truly believe that disciple making is not a ministry of the church, it is the ministry of the church. And when we do the ministry well, multiplication is a natural result. However, cultivating a culture of discipleship doesn't always come naturally to us in our churches. At times, we have reduced discipleship to mentorship when we meet for coffee once a week and talk about the latest Christian book. But that model falls short of true discipleship and also will not produce the type of disciples we need to see movements of multiplication in our churches and cities. In 2 Timothy chapter 2:2 is one of the most quoted verses when it comes to this area of discipleship. And yes, Paul does talk about discipleship here, but sometimes in zeroing in on this verse, we miss the broader context of this pastoral epistle. Paul is an apostle, and he is writing to Timothy, who's a pastor, about how to develop and defend a disciple-making culture in his local church. In 2 Timothy chapter 2:3-7, Paul gives Timothy some principles that can serve as guardrails for developing and defending a disciple-making culture in our local churches. Paul's first encouragement to Timothy is to be single-minded like a soldier. He tells him to stay focused. Think about it. If a soldier's in battle and bullets are flying everywhere, what happens if he starts daydreaming? He dies. And in the heat of battle, soldiers must stay focused if they want to survive. And Paul is telling Timothy the same thing here. He tells him, stay focused. Keep your eyes on Christ. Be single-minded like a soldier. The second encouragement is to be disciplined like an athlete. I once watched an interview with an Olympic track athlete who trained 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for 4 years to run a 12-second race. How much more should we discipline ourselves for an eternal prize? How much more should we discipline ourselves to make disciples? Discipline is critical because the world offers us all types of distractions to pull us away from what is best. We have to be willing to be unsuccessful in this world in order to be successful in the world to come. Our problem is that oftentimes we have two competing visions. We have one vision of making disciples and another vision of becoming the next mega something. And in pursuit of being mega, we can easily leave disciple making behind, trading it for a focus on numbers and size. We need discipline to help us stay focused on making disciples. Paul's final encouragement is to persevere like a farmer. I grew up in the city, so I don't have a lot of experience with farming. But recently, I got into one of those moments when I felt like it was my duty as an urban practitioner to have an urban garden. So I went out to the store and rented a tiller. Now remember, I don't know anything about farming. I'm thinking about tilling up the ground is going to be real easy. Just go up and down a few times and be done with it. Well, after spending 6 hours using the machine, you know what I had? A bunch of turned up dirt. And come to find out that it wasn't even deep enough to plant the seeds. So for 2 days, all I did was till the soil and chop up the dirt. Finally, after it was deep enough, we put in the seeds and I began to water it. And then the next day when we watered it again and again and again, you get the picture. This is how farming works. You water it day after day, and guess what you see? Nothing. You start questioning, am I doing this right? Because the only thing growing are weeds. But you keep on doing it each and every day until you see a little sprout pop up. And then you keep watering it and trying to protect it from all the bugs. But all you can do is pray that it stays healthy and that it keeps growing. How often do we persevere like that in our faith? Our flesh fights against us. We fear wasting our time. Why spend 2 years discipling someone who ends up joining another church because they didn't like your band? Why invest in someone who is just going to leave anyway? Paul points to a different way. He says that we have to persevere like a farmer, and pray for God to do the work. In our day and age, we have a sprinkler systems and to keep our gardens watered. But in that time, farmers did all the work of tilling the soil and planting the seeds, only to wait to see if God would send the rain. Discipleship, in many ways, is the same. It makes us wholly dependent on God. We can labor and invest and pour ourselves out, but only God brings the increase. The bottom line is that you can plant a church and not make disciples. But if you make disciples, you will plant churches that will plant churches. This isn't about drawing a big crowd. This is about being faithful to disciple the people God entrusted to you. A culture of effective, holistic disciple making will produce multiplication. The dangerous shift that we have to be aware of as church planners is that you go in with the missional mindset because you're trying to survive. You need people. You have the right mindset, but the wrong motivation. Because once you get to a place when you're comfortable, then survival mode kicks in. You put it into neutral. You focus on maintaining instead of multiplying. But I want to challenge you today to consider this. You were made to multiply. Multiplication isn't something that's reserved for the healthiest and wealthiest churches. It's not something that comes with age or growth. It's intended to be a part of the DNA of every body of Christ. Multiplication ought to be a critical component of our survival. I understand the challenges that multiplication brings us. It's not easy, but I do believe it is critical to the health of our churches and to the success of our ministry. In his book, Gaining by Losing, J.D. Greear writes it this way: life for the world comes only through the death of the church. Death in sending our precious resources, our best leaders, our best friends. It's not through our success that God saves the world, but through our sacrifice. He calls us not to a platform, but to an altar. So quickly, I want to give you 3 ways to infuse multiplication in your disciple-making culture from the very beginning. Number 1, make disciples. Jesus said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Secondly, mobilize your disciples. The harvest is plentiful, and it's the laborers that are few. You are the answer to that prayer. And finally, mentor your disciples. You have to train them. Mission isn't simply about reaching the lost. Mission is a tool for your personal sanctification. You and your church members won't be healthy if you aren't on mission. Multiplication isn't something you wait for. It's a choice you make from the beginning in order to pursue the long-term holistic health of your church family.